I never thought I'd end up here. Out of all the places I could have worked, out of all the jobs I could have taken, somehow I became the night guard of an abandoned train station. It doesn't even make sense when I say it out loud. Why would a station that's been closed for decades still need a guard? Why would anyone bother? The tracks are rusted. The ticket counters are covered in dust. The benches sit beneath cobwebs, brittle enough to collapse if someone sneezed on them. And yet I come here every night. I clock in at midnight, and I leave just after sunrise. No passengers, no trains, just me, a flashlight, and the endless echo of silence between the walls. At least, that's what I thought during my first week. I should probably explain how I ended up here. Work hasn't exactly been easy to find. After everything that happened last year, I needed something quiet, something away from people. The ad in the newspaper looked almost too good. Night security guard wanted, remote location, good pay, solitude preferred. It was almost like the job was written for me. The pay was more than generous, and I figured how hard could it be to guard something that's already abandoned. When I first arrived, I expected decay, and I wasn't wrong. The outer walls are cracked, graffiti sprawled across the concrete in layers of color. Weeds grow up through the platform tiles. The ticket booths still have old posters plastered across the glass, their edges curled and yellowed with time. But the strangest thing about the station isn't what's broken, it's what's intact. The clocks still tick. The fluorescent lights hum softly overhead, though no one seems to service them. And the floor swept clean, almost spotless, looks nothing like the dust-covered ruins I was expecting. It felt like walking into a place that had been forgotten by people, but not by something else. I didn't meet anyone on my first night. The key had been mailed to me in a plain envelope. No return address, no note, just a brass key and a scribbled number. Platform 3. I let myself in, half expecting alarms or motion sensors. Nothing, just the sound of my footsteps echoing against the high-arched ceilings. For hours, I sat there at the edge of the platform, listening to the quiet. I almost convinced myself it would be easy money. Just show up, sit around, and go home. But then, around 4 in the morning, I heard it. At first, it was faint, a low hum, like the distant vibration of rails when a train is coming. Except the line here is disconnected on both ends. One side of the tracks leads into a wall of collapsed stone. The other is nothing but overgrown forest, the tracks vanishing into tangled roots. Still, I swear I heard it. The steady metallic rhythm of wheels turning on tracks, closer, louder, until the very ground beneath my boots seemed to tremble. And then, silence. Nothing came. No train, no lights, no screech of brakes. Just the hollow echo of an arrival that never happened. I told myself it was my imagination, that maybe old tracks could shift or settle in the cold. But a part of me knew better. That sound was too deliberate, too precise. When I locked up and left at sunrise, I almost didn't come back. But the money I needed more than I'd like to admit. And now, every night I return, I sit here in the dark, waiting, because no matter how many times I try to ignore it, the sound always comes back. And something tells me that one night, it won't stop at just a sound. When I showed up for my second week, someone was waiting for me. I wasn't expecting anyone. The key had always been left for me. The job so detached from any actual human presence that I thought I was alone. But there he was, standing beneath the flickering light of Platform 3, like he'd been there all along. He looked too old to still be working, lean, wiry, with a face carved from wrinkles and cigarette smoke. His uniform wasn't like mine, though. It was older, the kind of security jacket they stopped making years ago. The logo faded, nearly invisible on the chest. "You're the new one," he said. Not a question, just a fact. I nodded slowly. He didn't smile, didn't shake my hand. Instead, he stepped closer, the soles of his boots scraping against the tiles. "I don't know what they told you when they gave you this post," probably nothing. But if you're going to last here, you need to know the rules. I thought he was joking at first. Rules for guarding an empty station. But the way he said it low steady, without even a flicker of humor, told me he was serious. Deadly serious. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The creases were deep, the edges worn thin, like it had been opened and refolded thousands of times. He held it out. I didn't take it right away. "Go on," he muttered. "Read it." I unfolded it carefully. 7 lines, written in dark ink, each one numbered. The first rule made my chest tighten. 1. Never look directly into the train windows. Underneath, in smaller writing, almost like an afterthought, "If you see yourself smiling, look away." I glanced up at him. He didn't meet my eyes. The second rule. 2. Do not speak to anyone who steps off the train. Another note beneath. They are not passengers. They only wear the shape of people. My mouth felt dry as I read the rest. Point 3. If you hear your name whispered from the tracks, ignore it. No one here knows you. 4. Always stand on platform 3 at 3:15 a.m. Witness the arrival. If you're absent, something else will come. 5. When the conductor tips his hat, you must nod back. If you don't, the train won't leave. 6. Do not, under any circumstance, board the train, no matter what it promises. 7. At sunrise, leave immediately. If you linger, the station will change, and you won't find the exit. I lowered the page slowly, feeling the weight of each word. "This is a joke," I said. But my voice didn't sound convinced. The old man finally looked at me then, his eyes dull and tired, but sharp in a way that made my skin prickle. "Does it feel like a joke?" he asked. I wanted to laugh, to say yes, to crumple the paper and toss it aside, but deep down, I couldn't. Not after hearing the phantom train that first night, not after the silence that followed. "Who wrote these?" I asked. His gaze shifted toward the tracks. "Not me." That was all he said. For the rest of the shift, he lingered on the far end of the platform, smoking one cigarette after another, watching the rails with an expression I couldn't read. I kept rereading the rules, as if the repetition might make them make sense. 3:15 came, just like he said it would. At first, the sound rose from the forest metal wheels grinding, the rattle of weight on steel. The hairs on the back of my neck bristled as the vibration spread under my boots. And then, it appeared. A train, no headlights, no announcement, no station buzz. Just the long black body of a train, gliding in from tracks that should have led nowhere. Its windows shone faintly, though the glass seemed too dark to see through. It slowed, brakes sighing, and came to a stop before us. The old man didn't flinch. He simply raised a hand, subtle but firm, telling me to stay still. I wanted to look inside, to prove to myself it was empty, but the first rule screamed in the back of my mind: never look directly into the train windows. I averted my eyes, staring instead at the cracks between the tiles. My pulse thundered. There was movement, a sound like footsteps shifting just beyond the glass. A soft knock, almost playful, against the window closest to me. My chest tightened. I clenched my jaw and didn't look. Then, from the far side of the train, the conductor stepped down. Tall, dressed in a faded uniform with a cap pulled low. His face was shadowed, impossible to see clearly. He stood still for a long moment before tilting his head toward us, and then he tipped his hat. The old man beside me gave the faintest nod. I swallowed hard and copied him. The conductor didn't speak. He simply climbed back onto the train, and without another sound, the doors closed. Slowly, silently, the train slid away, vanishing back into the forest where the tracks should have ended. My knees nearly buckled. The old man flicked his cigarette onto the tracks. "You follow the rules," he said, "or you won't last a week." Then he walked away, fading into the shadows at the end of the platform, leaving me alone with the rules trembling in my hands. The paper never left my pocket after that night. I carried it, folded tight, edges digging into my leg with every step, as if the rules themselves might shield me from what waited in the dark. For a few nights, nothing happened. Not beyond what I'd already seen. The hum of the rails at 3:15, the black train sliding in, the conductor tipping his hat, the silence that followed. I followed every rule. I didn't look into the windows. I didn't speak to the shadows behind the glass. I stood on platform 3 at the exact time, and I nodded back when the conductor dipped his cap. But curiosity is a sickness, and it didn't take long for it to infect me. It was the 5th night, cold enough that my breath hung in the air like smoke. I'd been staring at the clock for hours, waiting for 3:15, when I heard it. A sound, different this time. A whisper. It rose from the rails, soft and deliberate, threading through the still air. I froze, straining to hear. And then it came again, clearer this time. My name. I jolted upright, heart hammering. It wasn't just a trick of sound. It wasn't my imagination twisting the wind. I heard it plain as day. Someone's whispering my name from the tracks. I gripped the folded paper in my pocket, so tightly it crumpled. Rule number 3 echoed in my head. If you hear your name whispered from the tracks, ignore it. But ignoring something like that is easier said than done. The whisper came again, low and coaxing, stretching my name like it belonged to them, not me. I stepped closer to the edge without realizing. My flashlight beam skimmed the rusted rails. Nothing there, just the empty darkness beyond. Still, the voice was so close. Hello. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Just one word. Quiet, trembling. The whisper stopped. Silence spread across the station like a heavy blanket, suffocating, unnatural. Even the ticking of the wall clock seemed to vanish. I forced myself to step back, chest tight, telling myself it was nothing. That one word didn't matter. But the stillness that followed didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the whole place was holding its breath. And then, from the forest beyond the tracks, I saw it. Something moved between the trees. A pale figure, flickering in and out of sight. Its shape wrong, too thin, too tall, limbs bending at angles that made my stomach twist. It stopped just beyond the tree line. Watching though I couldn't see its face, I knew it was staring at me. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over the platform edge. My flashlight beam shook violently, but when I blinked, when I dared to look again, the figure was gone. The rails groaned beneath me, vibrating as if something massive had just shifted. And then, as though nothing had happened, the sound of the incoming train filled the night. The black engine slid into view, gliding to its usual stop. I didn't dare look into the windows this time. My eyes stayed locked on the tiles at my feet. The conductor stepped down, tipping his hat. My nod was quick, desperate, almost a bow. He lingered this time, just a moment too long. The brim of his hat tilted ever so slightly toward me, as though he knew what I had done. Then, wordless, he returned to the train. The doors closed, the wheels clattered, and the train slipped away into the forest once more. I didn't breathe until the sound had fully vanished. That night, when the sun finally bled across the horizon, I left faster than I ever had before. The rules didn't feel like suggestions anymore. They felt like a noose tightening around my throat, and I had already tugged on the rope. I tried harder after that night, harder to obey, harder to keep my eyes down and my mouth shut. But the rules are cruel in the way they test you. They wait for the moment your nerves are weakest, when your mind is foggy with fatigue, and that's when they reach out. It happened 3 nights later. The air was heavier than usual, damp with a mist that clung to the platform like breath against glass. The station lights buzzed overhead, dimmer than I'd ever seen them, leaving long pools of shadow between each lamp. I stood on platform 3 at 3:15 sharp, just like always. The hum came, steady as thunder rolling in the distance, and soon enough, the black train slid out from the forest like a serpent uncoiling. This time, though the doors opened, they'd never done that before. Not once. The hiss of the release echoed through the station, louder than it should have been. My pulse jumped. I remembered the second rule, written in heavy ink. Do not speak to anyone who steps off the train. They are not passengers. For a few seconds, nothing moved. The open doorway gaped like a mouth, and then a figure stepped out. At first glance, he looked normal, too normal. A young man in a brown coat, suitcase in hand, his face calm but blank, like someone carved from wax. He looked around as if searching for something familiar, and then his eyes landed on me. "Excuse me," he said softly. His voice carried perfectly in the mist, far too crisp for the distance between us. "What station is this?" I froze. My throat tightened. Every part of me screamed to answer. It was instinct, the human reflex to respond when spoken to. But I clenched my jaw shut, the rules burning in my mind. "Do not speak." The man tilted his head, slowly, unnaturally. His smile formed too wide, too sudden. "Please," he said, taking a step closer. The suitcase dragged behind him with a dull scrape. "I think I'm lost." I gripped the flashlight in my hand so tightly, my knuckles cracked. My lips pressed shut until they hurt. Another step. His shoes didn't make a sound against the platform, even though I could see them touch the tile. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I could smell him like iron and damp soil. His face leaned forward, searching mine, eyes shining, with something that wasn't human curiosity. "Won't you help me?" he whispered. Every word seemed to crawl under my skin, pressing against my skull from the inside. I wanted to scream, to tell him to back away, to run, anything, but I didn't. And then, from behind him, the conductor stepped out, tall, motionless, hat pulled low. He didn't look at me. He only looked at the thing in the brown coat. The passenger's smile faltered. His head jerked toward the conductor like a puppet on a string. Without another sound, he picked up his suitcase and walked stiffly back to the open doorway. The conductor tipped his hat toward me, slowly, deliberately. I forced my neck to move in return, though it felt rusted, like it might snap from the strain. Only then did the conductor step back onto the train. The doors closed. The mist seemed to suck inward, vanishing with the hiss of the brakes, and the train slid away once more into the forest. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was warning. The rules weren't superstition. They weren't arbitrary. They were protection, thin, fragile barriers between me and whatever used that train as a doorway. And now I knew, if I had spoken, even a single word, I don't think the conductor would have let me live long enough to regret it. I couldn't keep going blind. Following the rules was one thing, but not knowing why they existed was eating me alive. Every night felt like walking across thin ice, waiting to hear the crack beneath my feet. So, on my nights off, I started searching. The town's library had little about the old station, just yellowed newspaper clippings from decades ago. Most were boring updates about funding, construction delays, complaints about ticket prices. But one article, buried deep in the archives, made my skin crawl. It was dated March 3, 1972. Headline: Unscheduled arrival causes panic at Eastbrook Station. The article was short, vague. It claimed a train had pulled into the station in the middle of the night, a time when no service was scheduled. A few workers on the overnight shift reported seeing passengers disembark, though their descriptions didn't match, each witness giving wildly different accounts. Some said they looked like normal people. Others described strange movements, distorted bodies. One worker swore he saw his dead brother step off the car, carrying a suitcase. The official statement blamed fatigue, poor lighting, and hysteria. The station closed later that year. I reread the clipping until the paper nearly tore in my hands. That night, when I arrived for my shift, I brought it with me. I wanted to ask the old man, the one who gave me the rules, but he wasn't there. His corner of the platform was empty. The station felt heavier without him. Still, I couldn't help myself. I searched. The ticket office had been locked every night since I started, but the old brass key they'd mailed me had more than one tooth. On a whim, I tried it in the office door. To my surprise, the lock turned. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust. My flashlight beam cut across stacks of old ledgers and cabinets, swollen with damp. I coughed, covering my mouth, but pressed. Deeper, the cabinets held timetables, records of arrivals and departures, all from decades ago. But tucked inside one drawer was a leather-bound logbook, its pages covered in hurried handwriting. The first entry was dated 1969, March 14th. The train came again tonight. No schedule, no paperwork, just appeared. They told us not to record it, but I have to. Someone has to. My hands trembled as I flipped forward. April 2nd, the passengers there, not right. One asked me for directions, but his mouth didn't move when he spoke. The sound came from somewhere else. I didn't answer. I remembered the rule. May 19th, Jenkins spoke to one of them. He never came home. They found his cap floating in the river the next morning, empty. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep reading. The entries continued for years, each one a record of the same arrival, the same black train, the same warnings repeated. But the final entry chilled me more than all the others combined. September 5th, 1972. The conductor lingered tonight. He tipped his hat, but when I nodded, he didn't move. He waited. I think he was testing me, watching. The others don't understand. He's not just leading the train. He's keeping it here, holding it back. If we slip, even once, he won't. And then it won't be one train. It'll be all of them. The ink smeared near the bottom, as if the writer's hand had been shaking. There were no entries after that. I sat there in the dark office for what felt like hours, the logbook heavy in my lap. My thoughts churned with questions. Who wrote it? What happened to them? How many guards had there been before me? When I finally stepped back onto the platform, the station felt alive in a way I hadn't noticed before. The air hummed faintly, like a low electrical current buzzing through the walls. That night, when the clock struck 3:15, the train arrived as usual. The conductor tipped his hat. I nodded, but I couldn't stop staring at him. The shadow beneath the brim of his cap seemed deeper than ever, as if it weren't shadow at all, but an absence, like his face wasn't hidden, but missing. And for a moment, I swore he hesitated, like he was waiting to see if I understood. The logbook's words pounded in my skull. He's keeping it here, holding it back. The thought rattled me in ways I wasn't ready to face, because if the conductor was the only thing keeping the train and whatever rode inside from spilling fully into our world, then what would happen the day he decided to stop? The night after finding the logbook, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The rules were the same. The station was the same. But the air felt wrong, thicker, heavier, as though the whole place had been holding back a storm, and the clouds were finally about to break. I arrived early, well before midnight, the logbook hidden under my jacket. The silence pressed harder than usual, so suffocating, I left the radio in the office playing static, just to remind myself that the world outside still existed. By the time 3:15 approached, the mist was already curling low across the platform. The clock ticked, too loud, each second dragging me closer to something I didn't want to face. And then the hum began. It wasn't the usual distant vibration. This time it hit all at once, like the ground beneath me had been waiting to shake. The black train tore through the mist, screeching to a halt with a force that rattled the glass in the office windows. The doors hissed open. My stomach sank. They'd only opened once before, and it had nearly broken me. But tonight more than one figure stepped out. They came in pairs, tall, short, male-female shapes that looked human until you really looked. Their arms bent wrong, too stiff at the elbows. Their faces flickered, expressions resetting like bad film reels. One woman's smile never faltered, frozen wide as she tilted her head back and forth in jerky movements. I backed away. Pressing against the station wall, they spread across the platform, scanning, searching. Not one of them made a sound. I clutched the rules in my pocket until the paper tore at the edges. Rule 2 screamed in my mind. Do not speak to anyone who steps off the train. And then excuse me. The words came from a boy, no older than 12. He stepped forward, his clothes too neat, his shoes spotless against the grimy tile. His voice was calm, almost sweet. Do you know where my mother is? My throat locked. He stepped closer. She was on the train. I can't find her. Behind him, the others turned, their heads snapping toward me in perfect unison. I shut my eyes, pressed myself tighter against the wall. If I answered Diff, I even made a sound, what would happen? The boy's footsteps grew louder. His shadow stretched across the mist. Please, he said. His tone cracked now, more desperate. Please, help me. Every instinct screamed to respond. The rules pulsed in my head, the memory of the logbook's final entry pounding with my heartbeat. They only wear the shape of people. I bit down on my tongue until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The boy stopped inches away. I could feel the air shift as he leaned in, close enough that if I opened my eyes, his face would be right there. His breath was ice. And then, in a voice that no child could ever make, he whispered my name. I nearly broke. My lips parted without meaning to. But before a sound escaped, the conductor stepped down. The shift was immediate. Every figure froze, their bodies stiffening like puppets whose strings had been yanked taut. The boy straightened, his face smoothed, emotionless again. Without another word, he turned and walked back toward the train. One by one, the others followed. The conductor's presence was like a weight, pressing down on the entire platform. He didn't move until the last figure had boarded. Then, slowly, he tipped his hat. I jerked my head down in return, unable to meet the void beneath his brim. The doors shut. The train slid away, vanishing into the forest, leaving the platform empty once more. But the silence after wasn't relief. It was a warning, because for the first time, I realized something terrifying. The passengers hadn't been trying to trick me. Not really. They'd been testing me, and if the conductor hadn't stepped in when he did, I don't think I would have passed. That night, I didn't wait for sunrise. I ran. I abandoned my post, sprinting through the corridors until I burst into the open air. The horizon was still dark, no trace of dawn yet. My car sat alone in the lot, shadowed and still. I climbed inside, fumbling the keys with trembling hands. But when the engine started, I froze. In the rearview mirror, I saw the station, and standing at the far end of the platform, watching me, was the conductor, his head tipped forward, face lost in shadow. Even from that distance, I knew his eyes, or the absence of them, were fixed on me. I slammed the car into drive and sped away, refusing to look back again. But the image stayed burned into my mind. The conductor didn't need to ride the train to follow me. I didn't see the old man for 3 nights after that. Each shift. I arrived trembling with exhaustion, the logbook hidden in my bag, the rules clutched like scripture. The train still came, always at 3:15, and I obeyed every line without question. But without him there, the platform felt emptier, colder, and then, on the 4th night, he was waiting for me. He stood at his usual place, cigarette glowing in the dark, his gaunt face washed pale by the overhead lights. I almost ran to him, almost begged for answers. Instead, I held up the logbook. "You knew," I said, my voice cracked with the strain of sleeplessness. "You knew about all of this." His eyes flicked to the leather cover, but didn't widen, didn't show surprise. He exhaled smoke and said nothing. "You wrote it, didn't you?" I pressed finally. He shook his head. "Not me." He tapped ash onto the rails. "Someone before me. Just like you." The words hollowed me. Just like me. Which meant he hadn't been the first either. "How long have you been here?" I asked. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. Long enough. The silence between us stretched. I could feel the weight of something unsaid pressing in, and before I could stop myself, the question slipped out. "Why stay?" He glanced at me then, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not fear, not resignation. Guilt. "You don't get it, do you?" he whispered. "We don't just follow the rules to keep ourselves safe. We follow them to keep it contained." My stomach dropped. He turned away, staring at the tracks as the hum began to rise in the distance. "You think they'd only come for you? That this place is the boundary? No. The rules keep it tight here." Every nod, every silence, every hour we endured, not for us, it's for everyone else. The ground shook. The black train was already sliding into view. My hands trembled. "So what happens if we break them?" He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. The silence in his answer told me everything. The train hissed to a halt. The doors remained closed this time. The conductor stepped down, hat shadowing his face. And that was when I noticed something I'd never seen before. The conductor didn't tip his hat to me. He tipped it to the old man, and the old man didn't nod back. My chest froze. I turned to him, eyes wide, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. His cigarette trembled in his hand, ash spilling across his jacket. The conductor straightened slowly. The air thickened. "Why aren't you nodding?" I hissed, my voice barely audible. The old man closed his eyes. "I can't do it anymore." My blood ran cold. He dropped the cigarette, crushing it underfoot. His shoulders slumped, as though he'd been carrying the weight of 100 years. And finally, he looked at me. "You're next." The words gutted me. Before I could speak, the conductor turned. His faceless shadow swiveled toward me, waiting. I snapped my head down, forcing a nod so sharp my neck cracked. The conductor lingered, watching then. Without a word, he stepped back onto the train. The doors closed. The black car slid into the forest, vanishing into the mist. I staggered, my knees weak. The platform spun around me. The old man lit another cigarette with shaking hands. He wouldn't look at me. "You knew I'd end up here," I whispered. He exhaled smoke, his face hidden in shadow. "We all do." And that was when I understood. He hadn't been guiding me. He hadn't been protecting me. He'd been preparing me, grooming me to take his place. Because the rules weren't just survival tips. They were chains, and now they were mine. After the old man's confession, something inside me cracked. I couldn't keep doing it. Night after night, waiting for that train, waiting for shadows to test me, waiting for the conductor's hat tip, like a noose tightening around my neck. The rules weren't just rules. They were shackles, and I was chained to the platform. I thought about quitting, about never coming back. But I knew it wasn't that simple. The conductor had seen me. The passengers had whispered my name. Walking away wouldn't free Met, would only make me easier to find, so I made a choice. If I couldn't leave, I'd break the rules on my terms. That night, I arrived early again. The station was silent, the air heavy with the promise of the arrival. I stood on platform 3, the rules crumpled in my fist, sweat running down my neck even in the cold. The clock ticked closer to 3:15. My pulse matched it, steady, pounding. When the hum came, I didn't flinch. The black train slid out of the forest, massive and endless, its body darker than the night around it. The brakes screamed, sparks flickering against the rails, and it stopped before me. The doors hissed open. Figures stood in the threshold. Dozens this time, their silhouettes overlapping, faces blurred, movements stilted. They waited, watching. The conductor stepped down. His presence crushed the air from my lungs. Slowly, he tipped his hat. For the first time, I didn't nod. The silence that followed was unbearable. The mist thickened, the lights above flickered violently, and the figures inside the train began to shift. Pressing closer to the doors, the conductor's head tilted a fraction too far, like a predator studying prey, and then the whispers began, from the tracks, from the windows, from the forest beyond. My name, over and over, layered with other voices, countless tones overlapping like a chorus of drowning throats. I wanted to run, but my legs were lead. The conductor stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the platform, swallowing mine. The brim of his hat lifted just enough for me to see beneath. No face, no eyes, just emptiness. I thought I would be swallowed whole, and then I screamed. Not words, not answers, just raw, human sound. My defiance tore out of me, a sound that broke the suffocating silence. The effect was immediate. The passengers reeled back, their shapes spasming, flickering, like faulty film reels. The mist recoiled, hissing like it had been burned. Even the conductor froze, his form shuddering at the sound. For the first time, I felt like I had power, but it didn't last. The conductor's shudder turned to stillness. Slowly, his faceless void tilted again, and he raised a hand. The passengers surged forward. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking in my grip. They poured from the doors like water bursting from a dam, their bodies flickering between forms, strangers, friends, family. My mother's face screamed my name. A girl I once loved reached out with twisted arms. The rules tore through my head. Do not speak, do not look, do not board. But the rules had already been broken. I swung the flashlight wildly, beam cutting across their warped faces. They hissed, recoiling from the light, but more pushed forward. The platform swarmed with them. There was only one way left. The logbook's last words burned in my mind. He's keeping it here, holding it back. If we slip, even once, it won't be one train. It'll be all of them. I looked at the black doorway of the train. Its darkness pulsed like a wound, a gateway straining to open wider. If I boarded, maybe I could end it, or maybe I'd never come back. The passengers closed in, their whispers clawing at my skull. The conductor loomed, motionless, waiting. I made my choice, clutching the flashlight. I sprinted forward straight, toward the open doors. The passengers shrieked, lunging, but I forced my way through, body slamming into theirs, cold and brittle. As broken mannequins, their hands clawed my arms, my face, but I didn't stop. I crossed the threshold. The air changed instantly, heavy, silent. The inside of the train stretched wider than it should have, rows of seats vanishing into black. The door slammed shut behind me, and for the first time, the conductor followed me in. Inside the train, the world bent wronged. The aisle stretched too far, swallowing itself in black. Rows of seats flickered, vanishing and reappearing in different places as though I was looking at snapshots of 100 trains overlaid. The air was thick with dust, but no closer to ash. Something crunched beneath my boots. Bone. The passengers didn't follow me in. They lingered outside, pressed against the windows like shadows painted on glass. Their mouths moved in silence, forming words I couldn't hear. But I wasn't alone. The conductor stood at the far end of the aisle, still as stone. His hat brim never lifted, but I knew he was watching. I raised the flashlight. My hands shook so violently the beam jittered across the walls. "What do you want?" I whispered. My voice cracked in the stale air. For the first time, he moved. Not toward me, not away, just a slow tilt of the head, and then he lifted a gloved hand and pointed. I followed. The gesture. On the seat nearest the window lay a book, not the logbook, I'd taken from the office. Another, older, its cover cracked and peeling, pages curled with rot. Against every screaming instinct, I picked it up. The moment my fingers touched the leather, the whispers returned, deafening, endless, rushing, straight into my skull. Pages flipped on their own. Names scrawled in black ink filled every line. Dates beside them, some centuries old. And there, on the last page, a fresh entry. My name. Tonight's date. I dropped the book. It hit the floor with a sound too heavy for paper, like stone against stone. My stomach lurched. The train jolted, wheels grinding forward. I stumbled into a seat as the blackness outside the windows began to move. Not forest, not night, but cities, roads, oceans, flickering in and out as though the train wasn't moving through space at all, but cutting through layers of reality. And always, the conductor watching me. The train slowed. The doors hissed through the glass. I saw it wasn't the forest platform outside. It wasn't even the station. It was another place, another time. A different guard stood on the platform, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. The rules. His face pale, his eyes wild, just like mine had been. He looked at the train. He looked at me. And then, he nodded at the conductor. The doors closed. The black train shuddered, pulling forward again, carrying me deeper into the dark. And I understood. The old man hadn't lied. We weren't guarding the station. We were guarding everything else. The train never stopped. It only traded passengers. And tonight, it had chosen me. So if you ever find yourself at an abandoned station at 3:15 in the morning, and a black train pulls in from nowhere, pray, you're not on the list.